Thank you very much for having me. I'm always very, very happy to come to Sweden. You probably have noticed that television has changed significantly in the past few years. One thing that happened with them is that basically Amazon and Netflix have said we are going to commit to HDR. So I worked actually on the very first HDR show for Netflix. It's called Marco Polo Season 2, and that show actually got an award as well for the best picture in television from the American Cinematographer Society, shot by my very good friend Vanya Chernyul, ASC. And when we started that first production, we didn't really have a clue what's going on, nor there was anyone else to tell us how to shoot it and what to do. I wanted to use this opportunity here to basically tell you what we learned from that. When you are working for HDR, that look comes first. You have to decide on the look of your show before you start shooting, or the first day almost. So what you do is you basically, start talking about the looks, about the palettes, you start developing this. Based on that, we decide on the cameras, on feel and whatnot. We figure out some color palettes we like, and then we do camera tests, and based on those camera tests, we create a profile, a look, or we call it a showlet. And actually, the principle that we use is that we create one showlet for the whole season. In order for you to be able to implement that look and control that look, you have to use color management process. We know what is coming in from the camera, and we can completely control what is going to come out. Basically, just, you are in control what's coming in and what's coming out. That's all the color management does. And it doesn't really take a lot of effort to do it. You can actually simplify that process, but it's going to give you several other advantages. One most important advantage is the superior image quality. I mean, because you are on set and you see the image that's coming in the camera, you have the control of it, and you see the output, your final look on your monitor, you are really able to eradicate any problems that you could experience later down in the post by simply knowing that if something's wrong is going on or there's a problem happening, you can see it and remove it straight away in front of the lens. It does enhance a lot the creativity, because guys, let's face it, or girls as well, there is no such a thing as a perfect camera out there. Every camera needs a little bit tweaking and working and doing something to it, and you should not be limited by the technical kind of specification of your camera. You can work with it, and color management can help you. Very important factor is it gives you the control for both SDR and HDR. In our case, you see, we are mastering for HDR, but 90% of people will still be seeing it in SDR, so we have to make sure that SDR is also looking good. There is a big flexibility in it. Color management is not something that you lock and burn into the image. That means if it happens later in the edit that order of the shots changed, or we have to change the look, or something now doesn't work because the scene before changed the look or something like that, it's possible to really change the look. It's very flexible. It's like IKEA. It's always good to change your mind, and you can just go and make things around. And for the producers amongst you, the very good news is it does save time in the post. Since we color manage, we can actually be much, much faster. Why am I a big fan of Varicam? That cinematographers would come to me and say, Dado, I want to shoot with this camera, and the reason I want to shoot with this camera is because it can do 5,000 ISO. But what was very, very interesting is that when I actually started, talking to Panasonic about this color managed workflow that we're using on our shows, it turned out that they actually already thought about it, and that they had put in the camera an internal grading engine. So basically what you normally used to have in external hardware, those lookup table boxes, or even what you had to have inside your grading systems, they have put those processors already in the camera. And not just that, they have opened us that engine, so the software that we have developed called Color Lab, which is a software that we use for look creation, I'm going to show that in a minute how it works, we can actually wirelessly, via Wi-Fi, connect that software to a Varicam. So there is no wire, there is no complication of, what's happening. And, it's possible actually from your laptop via, Wi-Fi signal to send a lookup table and a CDL into the camera. The camera would apply that look just as a metadata. And not just that, it would create an XML file, a metadata file that would say, on this particular shot, at this particular time code, you were using this CDL and this lookup table. This is just a shot from a job, one of the first jobs I'd actually did with this camera. It was actually commercial for Panasonic. Very interesting job. We were supposed to recreate moments from great movies for an HDR TV from the consumer part of Panasonic. And when they approached me and they said, Dado, would you be able to help us because we want to have the best looking image for those screens? I said, well, why don't you guys talk to your professional department and we take one of your cameras and we go and actually shoot it with that camera. This is a shot from that particular commercial, and I have basically very quickly, in let's say 2 minutes, I have presented them with 3 options. I said, look, we can go this, or we can go this. And these were just basically options that I was creating with the Color Lab, and I was just pressing button and sending them to the camera, and camera was just updating and giving us any of those looks. And based on that, they decided, okay, this is, I think, the look we want. We locked that look and basically just started shooting. So it took about 5 minutes for us to decide how to do it. But what was really interesting is that, they were totally happy with the quality of props because the look was applied exactly then and there. They knew exactly what light levels they had to have. We were able to control and know, even though we were monitoring on small SDR monitors, I was able to confidently tell them, don't worry, the HDR master is going to look absolutely amazing because this is a color managed image. We know what levels we're recording, so it's all going to look absolutely fine. And we were able to shoot that scene in less than few hours. Actually, I have the software with me, so I want to show you how this process actually really works. It's something that I developed together with a French company called Firefly. I basically liked some of the algorithms they have, and they were able to implement this color science that I developed inside the software that is actually very easy to use. I'll basically go first into the look design mode. So this is the shot, from that particular, scene. And what I do is I go and I select the camera. So these are all the cameras that are supported. So amongst there is here a V-Log, which is for Panasonic camera. The next thing I do is I basically select what is my output. So first I go and say, okay, I'm going to be working in Rec 709 extended mode, and with that I have basically color managed. I know what's my input and I know now what's my output, and that makes my show lot perfect because no matter what signal is going to come in, I know exactly what's coming out. And this is basically the magic that mathematics works. These are just some examples of different film stocks. Like you have some Fuji, you have even a Vision 3, the 5207. There is a Neo stock as well. There is a print stocks, that you probably all know, they're very popular, and so on. So just by choosing, one of these basically, stocks, you very quickly, you come into so to say ballpark. But you don't have to do film. I mean, you can also just go with the what I call just a standard contrast curves, you can just do with that. Or I have also some palettes that are always expanding. So you see, I can just use any one of these palettes, as a basically starting point. But let's say, for example, I'll stick with this kind of Vision 3 look. So now let's say, okay, we assign a ballpark, but let's kind of now finesse this look. What we have here is an interesting set of tools where, for example, you say, I really like this blue. Can we make this blue a little bit stronger? So what I can do is I can go into these special curves. I can click onto one of the curves here, and I can say, okay, this level of blue I want to increase. So you see, I'm only basically doing that. Or this yellow, I think I want to take it down. And we go and we take this yellow down. So you see, I can completely get rid of it or increase it. This is very, very different mathematics that you normally find in color grading tools, because this is made for us to be able to embed it inside the lookup table. So it works really differently. It's not the same approach that you normally get inside the grading tools. Also, for cinematographers, contrast is more important than the color sometimes. I mean, contrast is so emotional. And like it is very difficult, like for me even, and I've been grading 10 years, to be on set and use like this kind of live grade tools and be able to create a good contrast. So I really had to have a tool that's going to allow me, even in the field at 3 o'clock in the morning, to be able to give a nice contrast. So these are like, this tool is for this kind of beautiful shaped S-curves. And that the smoothness of that S-curve is really the secret of the beautiful contrast. The moment you start getting the edginess, or it's where you kind of start losing it. So let's say this is our look. Fine, we love it. This is it. Why don't we then go now and save it? Now I can then have several options. I can send this look to what we call slots for later grading, or I can press it and send it straight to Resolve, ready for color grading there, or I can export it as a 3D LUT to be used in any other systems. Like every color grading system is supported, everything's working. But let me show you the live mode, because this is really what happens. I'm now in the live mode, and here is basically the look. This is my kind of the slots, and I can then quickly switch from slot to slot and change the look if I feel like it. But what I want to do now is, when I want to make the tweak from scene to scene, I'm not changing the LUT. I need to be very flexible. I only want to use the metadata. For that, I'm using the CDL tools. So you see here, I can influence my image so much. Even though my LUT is still the same, I can tell completely different stories. So here I could basically make a very cold, I could make a very cold image. Yeah, with a little bit desaturation, it could look in one way. Or if maybe the story is alchemy, I can make it, open it up and warm it up a little bit if I feel like it. Or I can even change the temperature here and make it very warm like this. But this is a CDL metadata that is compatible with every grading system, with Avid, with everybody. And so it's a ASC CDL. It's something that I can communicate and talk to everybody with this. So I'm not limited just to work with my color manufacturer, but with everyone. And what's really great is I can just say here, send LUT, and this is going to basically send this CDL metadata and this LUT into the camera. Camera is going to load it, apply to the output, and we are able to shoot with exactly this look applied to it. We are still capturing raw, nothing's changing, the raw signal is still being recorded, but we are viewing and monitoring and recording this metadata for basically with the look applied to it. This is how it's possible to actually shoot and achieve that very good quality that you see on today's kind of TV series, because the cinematographer does this on set, controls it. So what happens then is, when I come to the final grading, I just go back to my look design mode, and when I'm there, I go to my output and I say, I want to translate this look now to PQ1000 Rec 2020, and I start grading in HDR with the same look that was adjusted on set. And that's basically why we managed to finish everything in like 4 days. I do work with kind of what I like to say purists, with cinematographers who are looking to always push and get the best possible image. And one thing that we kind of did find a limitation with Varicam originally was that compression. What happened is that just now Varicam announced a new model of their camera called Pure. So what this is basically, think about it, it's a front it stayed the same, so it's the same sensor, and at the back they took the codecs that Ari used to originally for their raw camera recording, and they just attached the codec. So actually the camera is a little bit smaller even, and it gives you 120 frames uncompressed 4K RAW. Do you want to play the DCP of the Pure material, please?
Excuse me, do you have any change at all? No. Excuse me, do you have any change at all? Like, I just want to get a cup of tea and... Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Hãy lại đây để bắt đầu.
I want to now take you a little bit through kind of, the process, just to show you a little bit what can be done with it pure material. I'm going to use ACEs for this grading, and this is basically something that, in general, it's always going to give you better result, especially if you're shooting with the RAW cameras. RAW cameras are kind of made for ACEs because, it's a very wide gamut. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch. In ACEs, there is two things you need to do. You need to tell it what is the input transform, and which is basically, in this case, Panasonic V35, and you have to tell it what's the output transform, and output transform means what's the monitor you're going to grade. So what I'm going to do now is say, okay, my monitor is going to be Rexena 9, and this is going to be basically your look, that you're going to get out of the box. There is no grade applied to it. This is just pure ACES CCT, like basically from the Varicam RAW. You can certainly go and open this shot further, but I think you should always be careful not to give it more noise, you see, because if I start opening it like this, the image actually kind of, just starts breaking, because there is naturally, on a very low light, a level of noise at the bottom. So I think, you have to be very careful where you're opening shot if you want to try to get more detail into it. So first thing that I would do is I would basically desaturate it a little bit. This is one thing that I always do with 5000 ISO. Even though, look, you said they all look the same in color, I find that 5000 ISO usually gives me more color than what you would actually have on that level of light. Because in nature, what happens, the lower the light, the more color there is, the more saturation we see. Now, camera doesn't know that. Camera is working totally linearly, so it still gives you the huge amount of color and saturation, even though we are in a very low light. So you see, the moment I actually turn it down a little bit, the saturation like this, the color becomes a little bit more natural. You feel like, oh, actually, this is what I would expect level of color to have at that level of luminance. Now, if you do want to open it, one way how to do it is mainly to open the gain rather than, you know, do it on the shadow level. Keep your shadows low. The contrast should always stay as low as possible. Then you see I can slowly, like, you know, open it shut, and that way I'm keeping the noise level a little bit lower like that. Here is another example, because I love this shot. You know, it's a kind of a perfect example to, you know, what it looked like when they shot it. You know, it's, so you see it's like a raw file, and it looks like completely clipped, but because we are in ACES, look what I can do. I can just go and bring down all of that highlight detail. That sensor is very, very flexible. You know, it is very difficult to clip this camera. I must say, you have to try really hard, you know, to cause this camera to clip. So even though it looked like, you know, from kind of with this kind of Rec 709 feel look, you know, it looked like a completely like blown out look, I'm able to kind of bring down that highlights of her skin now. Feels really good. I can, you know, contrast the shadow to the level I really like. Desaturate it a little bit, you know, let's not kind of be kind of completely like a whole hot red. And I can then, you know, just kind of give a little bit more warmth into it if I feel like it. And there it is. There is our like a kind of, you know, fire scene with just 3 tweaks. That's it, you know. We got like a very natural, very clean, very beautiful looking image. This shot here is a 5000 ISO again, and you see what happens. The color by default looks very kind of forced. So let me kind of close it down a little bit. You know, I can go and show you that I can actually bring that highlight down, but there is no detail in those, you know, you know. By the way, for HDR, this is absolutely essential. Like, in HDR, we can see so much highlight detail. It's just incredible. So if you actually have a camera that is not very good in capturing that highlight detail, then, you know, you just don't get this beautiful, smooth look of the HDR. Everything looks a little bit like as if we converted an SDR image to be a little bit brighter. We love that kind of in HDR when we get this like slight fall off of the highlight. It doesn't really force it. And, you know, with Varicam, and especially now in RAW, we can actually see that into that highlight. We can decide how much of that brightness we want. So there we go. This is basically our kind of, you know, look like that. Now I actually take this shot a little bit further down, you know, because there is a good moment where she turns around. And then, you know, and I usually kind of feel like, okay, I want to grade to this particular look, you know, because I know this is more like more natural kind of light that I feel like it's important. So let's say I want to warm this particular look a little bit more. Like this, you know, I want to make it like a more like warmer feel. Maybe I can cool down the highlight. So you see, now when I actually go back, this is you see how beautiful this red now feels. So it's flooded with red, but it's not really hurting you. It kind of feels like, okay, I'm kind of got it. But let's say you want to have a little bit more detail in that shot. Now, just on a primary, you open up that gamma, and it feels almost like a daylight. You see, it's a kind of, yeah, no problem, it's there. Now, you know, if you decide, oh, listen, I actually really don't know whether that red is really something that I want to do, you have a power to kind of, you know, use your curves to kind of get rid of it completely. And you can say, you know, because we are again in ACES and in RAW, the precision in which we can control the color is incredible, you know. So we could make this, you know, completely now, let's say a cold look, you know. We can make this all kind of, you know, a little bit more like that, you know, no problem. We can get rid of this, you know, like a red, you know, fill if we want to. I want to show you also a little bit some daylights, you know, let's do that. This is an interesting shot. This is just out of the box. Basically, it feels very good. Now let's say I'm going to go and just maybe apply a little bit more contrast. Maybe let's make it a little bit more like a beautiful sunset and cool down the shadow a little bit. Okay, I can open up a little bit more color there. You see, I can make it very sad, like London normally is, or I can make it a little bit more exciting for romantic end of the story. What I like to do with generally most digital cameras is this. I kind of like this response of the film. And you see what I do is I apply this kind of film stock palette. So this is one of those Color Lab film stock emulations applied to it. So you see I can now like basically just, use that palette, like maybe I can warm this one up. And what gives me is just a little bit, I'm going to switch between like, this is the Rec 709 and this is that kind of filmic feel. It just kind of the highlight just starts feeling a little bit better. It's nice that we have this kind of strong, saturated and all of this, but it feels a little bit more filmic when we are like, work on a more subtle palettes. And when also film has this beautiful roll-off in the highlight. You see, look at the highlights, between these shots. So this is basically the Rec 709 look. And you see how the highlight in there in the sky starts a little bit clipping, whereabout when you do this kind of film emulation, it feels much more subtle. It gives you a little bit more roundness. And this is especially visible like with the skin tones. You see, like this is that close-up of the skin. And one thing, you will probably notice is like, actually, what? This has too much detail to begin with. Like, I don't think that any actress would ever want to see herself like on close-up like this with as much detail as that. So, this is just a little kind of primary, that I can apply to this shot. But let me now show you now what it would look like with, if I was to go with a little film base. And then straight away, you see the image gets kind of more of a kind of more pleasant skin. This is kind of, I don't know, that's the best way how to describe it. Some things you just kind of feel like that. So you see, this is like with a little bit film-like emulation. Now, what we can also do is then, we normally can go and apply a little bit of a softness to the skin. So maybe I went a little bit over the board with this, but this is usually where I start. I start with a lot and then reduce it a little bit more. Grain is an important part of our storytelling. And what's really nice, that when you are working with digital cameras, you can actually go and add some grain, but that grain you can control. So there is basically a nice 35 millimeter grain to it with a little bit film stock emulation just for the palette. And, there you go. On film, we wouldn't have this detail in the skin, but if I was to want to bring some in, they wouldn't be there, or we would have one level of grain and I wouldn't be able to tweak that grain up and down. But, now like with a good raw source master, we're really, really able to kind of, manipulate the image in whichever direction we want to go. This is also another, like an interesting shot, that we can completely close down if we feel like it, if we want to make it a very moody shot, There we go. Or, if we like it, we could just go and, keep it almost like in a nice daytime feel. That would be basically just a kind of a little, like a demo from me of, how to deal and how to work with Varicam.